So, in 2015, you started Farewill, which uses technology to innovate the will writing and funeral planning sectors. Since launching, you've built the company to over 50 people, you've won a ton of awards, and you've raised over $1 billion for charity by people leaving pledged donations in their wills, which is an amazing story, right? So what advice would you give to others who are looking to, start that journey? They've got an idea for a business, maybe they've just started building something. Looking back a couple of years ago to when you were setting up Farewill, what advice, what insights would you have given yourself?
Oh, such a good question. It so depends on how old you are and what you're looking to get out of the experience. I think for anyone doing it for the first time, the only advice that I'd give them is don't do it. Don't do it unless you're really sure that you want to work unbelievably hard. You can't just dip your toe in the water. And often, or sometimes have the pleasure of speaking to students who are doing entrepreneurial courses or that sort of thing. And I really go in hard being like, don't do this. Don't do this. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. If you choose to raise VC funding or you're trying to actually work on something very challenging, you're signing up for a long-term commitment that comes with really significant sacrifices. And so my first advice would be don't do it unless you're kind of built like that and you really want to, you love working hard and you want to spend most of your life doing that. Yeah. I think the second thing, if you do want to work like that, is to just do it and not worry about being in the perfect industry. You know, sometimes I'll meet people who say, I'm looking around for the right opportunity and they can do that until they're 50. I think it does get harder if you get the kind of golden handcuffs on. I got to do it straight out of university. So my annual income at the time was like £4. So it's not a lot to give up. I am often surprised that people don't scan around at all to see what the competitive landscape is like. So there's two different. It depends what someone's background is like. I think you can get people coming from finance or coming from kind of professional services industries who don't think about a product experience enough, and they just think, oh, here's a macro opportunity, kind of comps and exit multiples are good in this industry, so I'm going to start a business here. Yeah. You equally get people from the background more that I'm from, which is kind of creative industries and design, who will start a business and it's all product experience, it's all the human side of what they're building, but their price point is a quarter of what it'll cost them to make the product, and you just haven't kind of added those two things together. So I think you need a bit of rationality on both ends. Like, is there a big enough business that can be built in this space? Yeah. Are they, and then also is there a cut through, opportunity for building a differentiated product experience that you can realistically bring to life? I think the final factor is, what are the tailwinds? Okay. There is absolutely no substitute to just working in a growing industry. Yeah. There is nothing like it.
Yeah, if you're going to start a business right now, start it in AI, start it in Web3. Yeah. Do not start a retail shop selling coffee unless you've got some crazy USP. Yeah. You need to be riding a wave, don't you, to have the best shot of succeeding. I completely agree with what you said around golden handcuffs. I did 5 years for a big corporate, so leaving like a 6-figure salary to go to zero again, it would have been so much easier for me to have done that right away. But then again, I wouldn't have had the experience and skills to do what I do. So it's quite rare to find people like you that just go for it right away from the outset. You mentioned around raising VC money there. You've raised several million from investors to make this business happen. A lot of people that we speak to really struggle with doing pitches, with getting investors on board, with securing that capital to get the idea going. What tips would you give on looking to raise money?
Yeah, great question. So we've raised about £28 million so far from a mixture of angel investors, seed funds, and then later stage VCs. And I think there's probably a few bits of advice that I'd give. I'm a bit unusual in that I absolutely love that part of the process. I think you get some founders who don't like raising money. Yeah. For me, it's me and my element. I love the sales process, and I get so excited as I go through it. I get excited talking. This is quite tragic after almost a decade. I get excited talking about the company. I get excited talking about the opportunity. The first step in the process for me is I lock myself in a room and go absolutely nuts for probably 3 months trying to completely perfect the story. Okay. I've rewritten decks for fundraising probably upwards of 50 times in one fundraising process, like start to finish, every side of the deck, and then be like, no, it's not quite good enough. Okay. And I think it's useful to go through the process so many times of asking yourself, what is the story here? Is this really cohesive and cuts through? And then when you get to the next stage of, it's like Dragon's Den. You don't want to be there saying, oh, I don't know what it cost me to make a pencil or something. Yeah. So you need to know every number in the business in order that you can kind of forget it and relax. And if I'm talking about the story of our company, I often just, it's really satisfying to get to that level of comfort with the type of story that you're trying to tell, that it just becomes fun. And if you're enjoying it, the person on the other side of the table just picks up on your enthusiasm for the industry. I think lots of people will focus on a pitch being slick rather than it being interesting. Yeah. And that people are going to remember maybe 2 or 3 things that you say, and how are you going to bring those things to life, which might be about how the market's moving, how traction in the business is going, something that a customer has said about your business. That's so that's one side of it, is actually the pitch process. I've written if I get the first slide of a deck right, the rest of it takes me an hour to write. Okay. And if the first slide is wrong, it's all just like flowing out of the wrong place. How do you actually frame the category that you're in or the challenge that you're working on right from the get-go? Yeah. And if you do that right, you'll send decks to people and they'll just take meetings. They'll take meetings, or they'll be really excited about it. They'll bring partners to it straight away. The other things that matter are first impressions. First impressions are just unbelievably important in anything. And a lot of that comes down to how you can get introduced to someone. Like most VCs won't take just kind of random inbound submissions. So finding someone who can introduce you to a partner in a VC fund is you're already in the top kind of 10%, and then thinking about how do you explain your own background and why you're sitting in that chair opposite someone else. Why is this the most important thing that you could be doing with your time? And if you start the meeting well, the rest is all just academic. Yes. But if you start it on the wrong foot, you're dead. Yeah. And the other thing that people forget is that you're prepping the person on the other side of the table to go away and have an internal conversation. You're prepping for them, best case scenario, to go and sell to their own partners, because ultimately they're managing someone else's money. Yes. They go and raise money from external investors or pension funds or a Saudi wealth fund or whatever it is, and they're promising those people a return on their cash, and they want to spend the money. VCs get paid when they spend the money, and they also get highly paid when they make profit. So they are looking for good companies. But the person on the other side of the table is going to be your biggest advocate, and you're preparing them to go and relay the unique insights that you have about your sector to their other partners and say, we've found one in a 1,000 company that we should back. So it's good to think not just about the person in front of you, but about the conversation that they're going to have next as well.
Them on your side, getting them to be your stakeholder, your salesperson. Yeah. Okay. It's great that you've identified that you're good at that part of the job.
I just said I enjoy it.
You enjoy it?
I'm good
okay.
at it. I enjoy it.
Well, you've got good results, so
yeah.
I will say that you're good at that part of the job, right? You said something interesting on the Founders for Good podcast. You said, my job is not to be good at the things that I'm bad at. My job is to hire the right people who are better than me at those areas. It was a while back, so I'll repeat that, okay? My job is not to be good at the things that I'm bad at. My job is to hire the right people who are better than me at those areas, which I completely agree with.
I'm so delighted it wasn't a quote I now disagree with. Okay, yeah.
Well, what was important to you when hiring and building a team? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I think that's often what I think about is, I think when I was a greener manager, I used to think about, okay, well, are they 7 out of 10 good enough at a bunch of these different things? And I say especially with leaders in the business, you need people who are highly competent. And there's there are, over time, things have surprised me as kind of common modes of not being, of kind of, there are types of competence that you need at a leadership level in a company that are just, you can't get around it if you don't have it. Numeracy, just because kind of actually good logical structured thinking and a high level of basic numeracy is one that sometimes surprises you. You can meet someone who's 15 years into their career or 20 years into their career and then get 6 months down the line of working with them and realize you're just not on the same page in terms of how you structure your thinking. And then communication, just brevity and simplicity in communication. Jenny, who's our COO, is just the most fantastic communicator. She naturally synthesizes information, simplifies it, and then just goes forwards on whatever it is that she's trying to do. It's incredible. It's like I read this book, this biography of Napoleon, and I was just sending Jenny just pictures of almost every page, quotes from Napoleon that were like, who said this? Was it Jenny Zhao? Was it Napoleon? And so the question is, what do you look for when you're hiring people? I think over time I moved from kind of assessing general competencies to being like, what is this person incredible at? And are they, and then to dial that thing up to 11. And the rest of it, you just have to put the right support mechanisms around, or to have the right process to kind of counterbalance the stuff that they're not as strong at, and myself included. And I've kind of learned that there are some roles where you want to have absolute generalists. So it's not necessarily the most important thing that they're incredible at one thing. But in most roles, I've found we pretty much only hire generalists. We don't have any like very specialist roles in the business, and we hire people who are really good, quick, logical thinkers and very good brief communicators. And that overall general velocity and interoperability of people in the organization has led to a massive increase in organizational speed. There are probably other business challenges where you want someone with unbelievable degrees of technical expertise, like building AI models or something like that. I'm not going to get very far doing that. And then in terms of managing people, identifying, working with the person that you're managing to really ascertain where they want to go and what this thing is that they're incredible at. That I find is the most satisfying part of working with someone or managing them is seeing someone else realize that they're incredible, that they're incredible at something, rather than I'm not a very good manager in terms of, if they're not so good at something, developing that thing, that's less of my strength.
Okay, and it's an amazing feeling when you see somebody who perhaps didn't know they had that skill at the level that you then see it get demonstrated, and then they flourish and develop and smash it out the park. Yeah. It's like the most rewarding feeling in the world as a leader. Yeah, definitely. But
I've got a lot of thoughts about hiring. I was taught a kind of hiring methodology by someone called Michelle Coventry, who was part of our seed investors. They were a kind of a partner there, and she's like one of the top talent people in Europe. And probably when there was 3 or 4 of us in the company, took me and my co-founder and taught us how to run a really good hiring process, how to interview people, how to write great job specs, how to make job offers. And it was, I still think it's the most transformative thing that I've ever learned. And it's funny when you see people starting companies and there are these kind of bland or vanilla job specs, and you might be hiring a COO or like a C-level executive or something really important, and you think, this ad is terrible. Like, it's absolutely terrible. You're trying to hire a 1 in 1,000 leader who probably already has an incredible job paying more than what you want to offer them, and you're not even going to bother to make this job ad the most exciting thing you've ever seen. So it's a really weird one. Obviously, you're busy building the company, but getting the right people in place is so trite. Everyone says it every time, but like if you get the people right, everything else just kind of takes care of itself. And I still think that despite everyone knowing that, people don't put in enough effort. And I'm guilty of not putting enough effort sometimes as well.
I mean, everybody talks about it, but very few people actually take the necessary actions to make it happen. Like, I know you mentioned there you are obsessing over the quality of the job ad. I know for a while you were like open sourcing like the hiring like process or like the values or something you had on your website.
Oh yeah.
And all of that like cultural information is so important when speaking to new recruits.